The elderly woman saw an unfamiliar girl crying at her daughter's grave when she got closer. The mist hung low over Phoenix Cemetery, clinging to the weathered headstones like a shroud of memories. Emma Adams, her silver hair catching the weak sunlight, made her way along the familiar path, each step a testament to her weekly pilgrimage. In her trembling hands, she clutched a bouquet of white lilies, Claire's favorites. As she approached her daughter's grave, Emma's heart clenched with the familiar ache of loss. 3 years had passed since the tragic car accident that took Claire from her, yet the pain remained as fresh as the day she received the devastating news. The headstone, cold and unyielding, bore the inscription that still brought tears to her eyes: Claire Scott, beloved daughter, gone too soon. Emma knelt with difficulty, her aging joints protesting the movement. She placed the flowers gently against the stone, her fingers lingering on the engraved name. "Another year, my dear," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind through the trees. "It feels like just yesterday you were here with me, laughing and walking around. How I wish things were different." From her pocket, Emma withdrew a faded photograph, Claire's radiant smile frozen in time. She propped it against the vase, a splash of color against the somber gray of the tombstone. "I miss you so much, sweetheart," Emma continued, allowing the tears to fall freely. "The house is so quiet without your laughter." As Emma lost herself in memories, a sound pierced the cemetery's solemn atmosphere, the unmistakable sound of a child crying. Startled, Emma looked up, her dreamy eyes scanning the misty graveyard. There, just a few rows away, she spotted a small figure hunched over a grave, shoulders shaking with sobs. Concern overrode Emma's own grief. With effort, she pushed herself to her feet, brushing dirt from her knees. "Hello," she called softly, not wanting to startle the child. "Are you all right, dear?" The sobbing continued, punctuated by words that Emma couldn't quite make out. Slowly, she made her way towards the crying child, her cane tapping a gentle rhythm on the damp grass. As she drew closer, Emma could see it was a young girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old, with long dark hair obscuring her face. "Sweetheart," Emma said gently, reaching out to touch the girl's shoulder. "What's wrong? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up, her tear-stained face a mask of confusion and grief. "I always come here," she hiccuped between sobs. "This is my mommy's grave, but I don't understand. It has someone else's name on it. It says Claire Scott, but that's not her name. I'm so confused." Emma felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. She steadied herself on her cane, her mind reeling. What do you mean, dear? This can't be your mother's grave. My daughter Claire is buried here." The girl shook her head vehemently, her small fists clenching. No, my mummy is here. Daddy brings me every week. But the name is wrong and I don't know why." Emma's heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out on her brow despite the chill in the air. She glanced back at Claire's grave, then at the confused and distraught child before her. Something was terribly wrong, a mystery that threatened to unravel the fragile peace she'd managed to find in her grief. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Samantha," the girl replied, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Samantha Lewis." Emma's mind whirled with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. How could this child believe her mother was buried in Claire's grave? What cruel mistake or twisted plot had led to this moment? As if summoned by the tension in the air, a man's voice called out across the cemetery. "Samantha? Samantha, where are you?" The girl's head snapped up, her tears momentarily forgotten. "Daddy! I'm here, Daddy!" A moment later, a man in his late 30s came hurrying down the path, his face etched with worry. He stopped short when he saw Emma standing next to Samantha, his eyes darting between them and the gravestone. "I'm sorry," he said, slightly out of breath. "I hope she wasn't bothering you. Samantha, you know you shouldn't wander off like that." Emma straightened, fixing the man with a piercing gaze. "Sir, I think we need to talk. Your daughter seems to believe her mother is buried here, but this is my daughter's grave. Can you explain what's going on?" The man's face paled, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. We've been coming here for years. I was told this was where Anna, my wife, was laid to rest. But the name, I never understood why it was different. I always thought it was some kind of mistake. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a heavy cloak. I think, she said slowly, that we've stumbled upon something far more complicated than a simple mistake. And I, for one, intend to get to the bottom of it. As the mist swirled around them, Emma, Samantha, and the bewildered father stood in uneasy silence, the gravestones looming like silent sentinels, guarding secrets that were only beginning to surface. So little did they know that this chance encounter in the cemetery would be the first thread unraveling a tapestry of lies, love, and sacrifice that would change their lives forever. The tension in the air was palpable as Emma, Samantha, and George stood before Claire's grave, each grappling with the implications of their shocking discovery. Emma's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible situation before her. How could two families believe their loved ones were buried in the same plot? The very foundation of her grief, the solace she had found in visiting Claire's final resting place, now felt like shifting sand beneath her feet. George, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm, placed a protective hand on Samantha's shoulder. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've been coming here for years. The hospital, the funeral home, they all confirmed this was where Anna was laid to rest." Emma's eyes narrowed, her maternal instincts kicking in despite her own turmoil. "And you never questioned why the name on the headstone was different?" she asked, unable to keep a hint of accusation from her voice. George flinched, guilt flashing across his features. I did at first, but we were so overwhelmed with grief, and when I asked, they told me it was a clerical error that would be fixed. After a while I don't know. I guess I didn't want to make waves. I was just trying to keep it together for Samantha." Samantha, still clutching her father's hand, looked up at Emma with wide, tear-filled eyes. "But if this isn't Mummy, where is she? And who's Claire?" The innocent question hit Emma like a physical blow. She knelt down, ignoring the protest of her aging knees, to meet Samantha's gaze. "Claire was my daughter's sweetheart. She died in a car accident 3 years ago. At least, that's what I was told." The implications of her own words sent a chill down Emma's spine. If there was confusion about who was buried here, could there be more to Claire's death than she had been led to believe? George ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. "This is insane. There has to be some explanation. Maybe there was a mix-up at the funeral home, or the cemetery made a mistake with the plots." Emma shook her head, her jaw set with determination. "No, this goes beyond a simple mix-up. Think about it, two families, told their loved ones are buried in the same plot, with a headstone that matches neither of the deceased. This isn't an accident. This is deliberate." The weight of her words settled over them like a heavy shroud. George paled, pulling Samantha closer to him. But why? Who would do something like this? And to what end? Emma's mind whirled with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I intend to find out. My Claire, she was young, vibrant. She worked as a graphic designer, had her whole life ahead of her. The accident that took her life, it never sat right with me. There were always little details that didn't add up." George nodded slowly, a spark of recognition in his eyes. Anna, she was a nurse, dedicated, always helping others. Her death was sudden too, a complication during a routine procedure, they said. But now that I think about it, we were never allowed to see her body. They told us it was too badly damaged. Samantha tugged on her father's sleeve, her young face scrunched in confusion. "Daddy, what's going on? Is Mummy here or not?" George knelt down, enveloping his daughter in a hug. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to find out. I promise." Emma watched the exchange, her heart aching for the child whose world was being turned upside down. She thought of Claire, of the countless questions she had pushed aside in her grief. No more, she decided. It was time for answers. "We need to approach this systematically," Emma said, her voice taking on a strength she hadn't felt in years. "First, we should check with the cemetery office, see what records they have on file for this plot." George nodded, standing up and taking Samantha's hand. "Agreed. And after that, I think we need to pay a visit to the funeral home that handled Anna's arrangements." As they made their way towards the cemetery office, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the misty graveyard, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Still, a shiver ran down her spine, and she quickened her pace. The cemetery office was a small, nondescript building near the entrance. A tired-looking man in his 50s sat behind the desk, barely glancing up as they entered. Emma took the lead, approaching the counter with a determined stride. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm. "We need to see the records for Plot 237, Section C." The man looked up, his bored expression shifting to one of mild interest. "That's an odd request. May I ask why?" Emma exchanged a glance with George before responding. "There seems to be some confusion about who exactly is buried there. We need to clarify the situation." The clerk's eyebrows shot up. "Confusion? That's not something we hear often." "All right, give me a moment." As he tapped away at his computer, Emma felt her heart racing. This was it, the first step towards unraveling the mystery that had upended their lives. After what felt like an eternity, the clerk frowned at his screen. "That's odd," he muttered. "What is it?" George asked, leaning forward. The clerk looked up, his face a mask of confusion. "According to our records, Plot 237 in Section C is empty. It's listed as available for purchase." Emma felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. "Empty," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "But that's impossible. There's a headstone there. We've been visiting for years." The clerk shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what to tell you. Our records are usually impeccable. If there's a headstone there, it shouldn't be." George stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable. Are you telling me that for years we've been visiting an empty grave? That our loved ones might not even be in this cemetery?" The clerk held up his hands defensively. "Sir, please calm down. I'm just telling you what the records show. I can call my supervisor if you'd like, but—" "Yes," Emma interrupted. "Call your supervisor. In fact, call the cemetery director. This goes beyond a simple clerical error." As the clerk reached for the phone, Emma turned to George and Samantha. The little girl was clinging to her father's leg, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Emma's heart went out to her, remembering how difficult it had been to explain death to Claire when she was young. Now Samantha was facing something even more incomprehensible. "It's going to be okay," Emma said softly, kneeling down to Samantha's level. "We're going to figure this out. Your daddy and I won't stop until we know the truth." Samantha nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Promise?" Emma felt a lump form in her throat. "I promise, sweetheart, no matter what." As they waited for the cemetery director to arrive, Emma's mind raced with possibilities. If the graves were empty, where were Claire and Anna? Could they possibly be? No, she couldn't allow herself to hope. The pain of losing that hope again would be unbearable. Yet, as she looked at George's determined face and Samantha's trusting eyes, Emma knew that there was no turning back. Whatever secrets lay buried beneath the surface of this mystery, she would unearth them. For Claire, for Anna, and for the truth that all of them deserved. Little did Emma know that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately redefine everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and the lengths one would go to protect those they hold dear. As the cemetery director's footsteps echoed down the hallway, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at George and Samantha, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and fear that mirrored her own tumultuous emotions. In that moment, standing on the precipice of uncovering a truth that could shatter their worlds, Emma realized that some journeys are too important to face alone. Dear reader, if you find yourself captivated by the mystery unfolding before Emma, George, and little Samantha, if your heart aches for the truths they seek and the lies they must unravel, we invite you to join us on this emotional odyssey. By subscribing to our channel, you'll ensure you don't miss a single twist or turn in this gripping tale of love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Every subscription is a beacon of support, illuminating the path for these characters as they navigate the shadows of deception. Together we can uncover the truth buried beneath years of secrets and lies. Don't let Emma face this challenge alone. Be there with her, every step of the way. Subscribe now, and let's embark on this heart-wrenching journey together. The cemetery director's arrival brought little comfort to Emma and George. His furrowed brow and tight-lipped expression spoke volumes before he even uttered a word. As he pored over the records, making calls and consulting with his staff, Emma felt a growing unease in the pit of her stomach. "I'm afraid I don't have any answers for you at the moment," the director finally said, his voice tinged with frustration. "This situation is unprecedented. We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation." George slammed his fist on the desk, causing Samantha to jump. "That's not good enough. Our loved ones are missing, and you're talking about bureaucratic procedures." Emma placed a calming hand on George's arm. "We understand this is complicated," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But we need answers. Is there anyone else we can speak to? Someone who might have more information?" The director hesitated, then sighed. "There is one person who might be able to help. Detective Brandon Cole. He's handled some unusual cases for us in the past. I can give you his contact information." As they left the cemetery office, Emma clutched the detective's business card like a lifeline. She turned to George, who was trying to comfort a distraught Samantha. "I think we should call him right away. The sooner we get to the bottom of this, the better." George nodded, his eyes haunted. "Agreed, but what do we do in the meantime? How do I explain this to Samantha?" Emma's heart ached for the young girl. "We tell her the truth, as much as we can. That we're trying to find out what happened to her mother, and that we won't stop until we have answers." Later that afternoon, Emma sat in her living room, waiting for Detective Brandon Cole to arrive. George had taken Samantha home, promising to meet with Emma the next day to continue their investigation. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. A sharp knock at the door startled Emma from her reverie. She opened it to find a man in his early 40s with piercing blue eyes and a face that looked like it had seen its fair share of trouble. "Miss Adams?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I'm Detective Brandon Cole. I understand you have an unusual situation on your hands." Emma ushered him in, quickly explaining the bizarre events at the cemetery. As she spoke, she noticed a flicker of something, recognition, concern in the detective's eyes. "I have to say, Mrs. Adams, this is one of the stranger cases I've come across," Brandon said, jotting notes in a small pad. "But I've learned in this job that nothing is impossible. I'll do what I can to help you get to the bottom of this." As Brandon asked questions and took down details, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this detective than met the eye. His questions were pointed, almost as if he already had some idea of what might have happened. "Detective Cole," Emma said hesitantly, "I can't help but feel like you might know more about this than you're letting on. Have you encountered something like this before?" Brandon's pen paused mid-sentence. He looked up at Emma, his eyes unreadable. "Miss Adams, in my line of work I've seen things that would keep most people up at night. Let's just say that sometimes the truth is more complicated than we'd like to believe." The chill ran down Emma's spine. "What do you mean?" Brandon sighed, closing his notebook. "I mean that in cases like these, we often find that the people we thought we knew had secrets. Deep, dark secrets that they went to great lengths to protect." Emma's mind raced. Could Claire have been involved in something dangerous, something that would have led her to fake her own death? The thought was almost too painful to consider. "I know this is difficult, Brandon continued, his voice softening slightly. "But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that what we uncover might change everything you thought you knew about your daughter." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "I don't care what she might have done," she said fiercely. "If there's even a chance that Claire is alive, I need to know. I need to find her." Brandon nodded, a look of respect crossing his features. "Then we'll find her, Mrs. Adams. But I want you to understand this investigation might take us down some dark paths. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Emma straightened her shoulders, a determination she hadn't felt in years coursing through her. "I've spent 3 years mourning my daughter, Detective. If there's a chance she's out there, there's nothing I wouldn't do to bring her home." As Brandon prepared to leave, promising to begin his investigation immediately, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Whatever lay ahead, whatever truths they might uncover, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Little did Emma know that Detective Brandon Cole carried his own secrets, secrets that would soon collide with her quest for the truth, setting in motion a chain of events that would test the limits of love, loyalty, and the lengths one would go to protect those they care about. The following days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled investigations for Emma. Detective Brandon Cole had set up a makeshift command center in her living room, pinning photos and documents to a large corkboard that now dominated the space. Emma found herself staring at it for hours, trying to piece together the puzzle of her daughter's disappearance. Jorg had been a constant presence, often bringing Samantha with him. The little girl had become a source of both comfort and heartache for Emma, a living reminder of the daughter she hoped to find. As Emma and George pored over documents and made countless phone calls, Samantha would sit quietly in the corner, coloring or reading, occasionally looking up with eyes that seemed far too wise for her years. It was on one such afternoon, as Emma and George were reviewing Claire's bank statements for what felt like the 100th time, that Brandon burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. "I think I've found something," he announced, waving a file folder, a lead on where Claire might have gone after her supposed death. Emma's heart leaped into her throat. "What is it? Where?" Brandon spread the contents of the folder across the coffee table. "I've been digging into Claire's life in the months leading up to her disappearance. It seems she was making frequent trips to a small town about 3 hours from here, Millbrook." George leaned in, studying the documents. "What was in Millbrook?" "That's the interesting part," Brandon continued. "On the surface, nothing. It's a quiet, unremarkable town. But I found records of Claire renting a post office box there under a false name." Emma's brow furrowed. "A false name? But why would she?" "Mom?" Samantha's small voice interrupted. "Is Claire like my mummy? Did she go away too?" The adults exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. Finally, Emma knelt beside Samantha, taking her small hands in her own. "We don't know yet, sweetheart. But we're trying to find out. And if Claire is out there, just like your mummy might be, we're going to do everything we can to bring them home." Samantha nodded solemnly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hope you find them both." Emma felt her heart breaking all over again. She turned back to Brandon, her voice tight with emotion. "What's our next move?" "We go to Millbrook," Brandon said firmly. "See if we can track down where Claire was staying, who she was meeting. It's our best lead so far." As they prepared for the trip to Millbrook, Emma couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The more they uncovered about Claire's secret life, the less she felt she knew her own daughter. Had she been so blind, so caught up in her own world that she'd missed the signs of Claire's troubles? The drive to Millbrook was tense, filled with speculative conversations and long stretches of anxious silence. Emma watched the landscape change from urban sprawl to rolling countryside, her mind racing with possibilities. What would they find in this small town? What secrets had Claire been keeping? As they entered Millbrook, Emma was struck by its quaint, almost idyllic appearance. Neat rows of houses lined tree-shaded streets, and the town square boasted a picturesque gazebo. It seemed an unlikely place for dark secrets and hidden identities. Their first stop was the post office where Claire had rented the box. The postmaster, a friendly older woman named Martha, was initially hesitant to help, citing privacy concerns. But Brandon's badge and Emma's heartfelt plea eventually won her over. "I remember her," Martha said, her eyes distant with recollection. "She came in every couple of weeks, always seemed nervous. Said she was writing a book and needed a quiet place to receive correspondence from her publisher." Emma's heart clenched. Another lie. How many had Claire told? And why? As they left the post office, Brandon's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened to the caller. "We need to go," he said abruptly, ending the call. "Now." "What? Why?" Emma demanded, struggling to keep up as Brandon strode purposefully towards their car. "That was my contact in Phoenix PD," Brandon explained, his voice low and urgent. "Someone's been asking questions about our investigation. Someone with connections. We might have stirred up a hornet's nest." As they drove out of town, Emma's mind whirled with fear and confusion. Who could be interested in their investigation? And why did it feel like they were suddenly in danger? Their answers came sooner than expected. As they rounded a bend in the road, Emma gasped at the sight before them. A black SUV was parked across both lanes, effectively blocking their path. Two men in dark suits stood beside it, their stances radiating menace. Brandon cursed under his breath, bringing the car to a stop. "Stay here," he ordered, reaching for his gun. "Lock the doors. If anything happens, drive. Don't look back." Emma's heart pounded as she watched Brandon approach the men. Their conversation was tense, voices raised but words indistinct at this distance. Suddenly, one of the men reached into his jacket. Emma's scream caught in her throat as she expected to see a gun. Instead, the man produced a badge. FBI. The next hour was a blur of questions, explanations, and barely contained panic. The FBI agents, it turned out, had been running their own investigation into a complex money laundering operation, an operation that somehow Claire had become entangled in. "Your daughter," one of the agents explained to a shell-shocked Emma, "stumbled onto something big. Something dangerous. We believe she faked her death to protect herself and you." Emma felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her. "But why didn't she come to me? To the police?" The agent's face was sympathetic but firm. "Miss Adams, the people involved in this operation have connections everywhere. Police, local government, even some federal agencies. Your daughter made the only choice she felt she could to stay alive." As the implications of this revelation sank in, Emma felt a maelstrom of emotions, relief that Claire might be alive, anger at the deception, and a deep, aching fear for her daughter's safety. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," the agent replied, "we work together. Your investigation has unknowingly been running parallel to ours. With your help, we might finally be able to crack this case and bring your daughter home." As they drove back to Phoenix, now with an FBI escort, Emma's mind raced with everything they'd learned. Claire, her beautiful, talented daughter, caught up in a world of crime and danger. It seemed impossible, like something out of a movie, and yet the evidence was undeniable. Emma glanced at Brandon, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the encounter with the FBI. There was something in his expression, a tightness around his eyes, a set to his jaw, that made her wonder if he'd known more than he'd let on all along. As if sensing her gaze, Brandon turned to her. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said softly. "I had suspicions, but I couldn't be sure. I didn't want to give you false hope." Emma nodded, too emotionally exhausted to feel anger. "I understand, but from now on, no more secrets. We're all in this together now." As they reached the outskirts of Phoenix, Emma's determination solidified. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they might face, she would not rest until she found Claire. Her daughter was out there, alone and afraid, and Emma would move heaven and earth to bring her home. So little did she know that the journey ahead would test her in ways she could never have imagined, forcing her to confront not only the depths of her love for Claire, but also the limits of her own morality. The line between right and wrong was about to become very blurred indeed. The world had become a kaleidoscope of shadows and whispers for Claire Scott. 3 years had passed since she'd made the heart-wrenching decision to disappear, to leave behind everything and everyone she loved. Now, huddled in a small apartment on the outskirts of a nondescript Midwestern town, she found herself reliving that fateful day once again. Claire's hands trembled as she poured herself a cup of coffee, the aroma a bittersweet reminder of lazy Sunday mornings with her mother. She closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of weakness, a moment to remember the life she'd left behind. It had started innocently enough. A freelance design job for a company that seemed legitimate on the surface. The pay was good, too good, and Claire had been eager to prove herself. But as she delved deeper into the project, inconsistencies began to emerge. The numbers that didn't add up, transactions that made no sense. Her curiosity, always her strength and her weakness, had led her down a rabbit hole of offshore accounts and shell companies. By the time she realized the true nature of what she'd stumbled upon, it was too late. They knew she knew. The first threat came on a Tuesday. A simple note left on her car windshield: "We're watching. Stay quiet." Claire had dismissed it as a prank, a coincidence. But then came the phone calls, the unmarked cars following her, the growing certainty that her every move was being monitored. She'd gone to the police, naively believing they could protect her. But the detective's eyes had shifted too quickly, his reassurances too practiced. Claire realized with growing horror that the corruption ran deeper than she could have imagined. That night she'd made the decision that would haunt her for years to come. With shaking hands, she packed a small bag, withdrawn as much cash as she dared, and slipped out into the darkness. The car accident had been staged, a brutal but necessary deception. Claire's heart clenched as she remembered her mother's face at the funeral, watching from afar, hidden behind large sunglasses and a dark wig. The pain in Emma's eyes had almost broken Claire's resolve, but the memory of the threats, the knowledge of what these people were capable of, had steeled her determination. Now, 3 years later, Claire lived a half-life. She moved frequently, never staying in one place long enough to form connections. Her once vibrant personality had been muted, replaced by a cautious, paranoid shell of her former self. She worked cash jobs, designed gigs under false names, always looking over her shoulder. The organization she'd uncovered was vast, with tentacles reaching into every corner of society. Claire had long since given up hope of exposing them. Now she focused solely on survival. But surviving wasn't living, and with each passing day, the weight of her isolation grew heavier. She missed her mother with an ache that never subsided. She longed for the simple pleasures she'd once taken for granted: dinner with friends, lazy afternoons in the park, the security of a place to call home. Claire's reverie was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Her heart leaped into her throat, adrenaline surging through her veins. No one knew she was here. No one should be knocking. With trembling hands, she reached for the burner phone hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Her fingers hovered over the keys, ready to dial the emergency number she'd memorized years ago. "Claire? Claire? Are you in there? It's me, it's Mom. Please, if you're there, open the door." The voice, muffled through the thin wood, sent a shock through Claire's system. It couldn't be. It was impossible. And yet she'd know that voice anywhere. Tears blurred Claire's vision as she approached the door. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to stick to the plan that had kept her alive for 3 years. But the longing, the desperate need to see her mother's face, overrode everything else. With a shaking hand, Claire opened the door. Emma stood there, older than Claire remembered, lines of worry etched deeply into her face. For a moment they simply stared at each other, years of separation and unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Then, with a choked sob, Emma pulled Claire into a fierce embrace. "My baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. My sweet girl, I found you. I finally found you. Claire clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. The feel of her mother's arms around her, the familiar scent of her perfume, broke something inside Claire. All the fear, all the loneliness of the past 3 years came pouring out in heaving sobs. When they finally separated, Claire's survival instincts kicked back in. "Mom," she said urgently, pulling Emma into the apartment and shutting the door. "How did you find me? Did anyone follow you? It's not safe. You shouldn't be here." Emma cupped Claire's face in her hands, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and determination. "It's okay, sweetheart. We know everything. The FBI is involved now. You don't have to run anymore." Claire's mind reeled. The FBI? But how? She'd been so careful, covered her tracks so thoroughly. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "How did you?" Emma led Claire to the small couch, sitting down beside her. "It's a long story," she began. "It all started at the cemetery." As Emma recounted the events of the past few weeks, the discovery at the gravesite, meeting George and Samantha, the investigation with Detective Brandon, Claire listened in stunned silence. It seemed impossible that a chance encounter could have unraveled the careful deception she'd maintained for so long. "So George's wife, Anna," Claire said slowly, piecing things together. "She must have stumbled onto the same thing I did. They silenced her permanently." Emma nodded gravely. "We think so. The FBI has been building a case against this organization for years. Your information, combined with what we uncovered about Anna, might finally be enough to bring them down." Claire felt a glimmer of hope, quickly extinguished by years of ingrained caution. "But Mom, these people are dangerous. They have connections everywhere. How can you be sure it's really over?" "We can't be," Emma admitted. "Not entirely, but sweetheart, you can't live like this forever. It's time to fight back." Claire stood, pacing the small room. The thought of facing her tormentors, of reclaiming her life, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "What about you?" she asked, turning to her mother. "And George, and little Samantha? I can't put you all in danger." Emma rose, taking Claire's hands in her own. "We're already in this, sweetheart. All of us. And we're stronger together. It's time to come home." As Claire looked into her mother's eyes, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The road ahead would be dangerous, full of uncertainties and risks, but for the first time in 3 long years, she didn't feel alone. With a deep breath, Claire nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, let's do this. Let's go home." As they packed up the meager belongings of Claire's hidden life, neither woman could shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real battle, the fight to reclaim Claire's life and bring down the organization that had stolen so much from them, was just beginning. But with her mother by her side and the promise of justice on the horizon, Claire felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But it was time to step out of the shadows and into the light, no matter the cost. The journey back to Phoenix was fraught with tension. Every passing car, every unexpected noise sent Claire into a state of high alert. Emma watched her daughter with a mixture of concern and determination, realizing just how deeply the past 3 years had scarred her. As they approached the city limits, Claire's anxiety reached a fever pitch. "Maybe this is a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're watching? What if we're leading them right to us?" Emma reached across the center console, squeezing Claire's hand. "We've taken every precaution, sweetheart. Detective Brandon and the FBI have been monitoring our route. We're as safe as we can be." Claire nodded, but her eyes continued to dart nervously from the rearview mirror to the road ahead. The Phoenix skyline loomed before them, a sight that once meant home but now represented a world of unknowns. Their first stop was a safe house on the outskirts of the city. As they pulled into the driveway of the nondescript suburban home, Claire's breath caught in her throat. Standing on the porch were George and Samantha, their faces a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "But are you ready for this?" Emma asked gently. Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself. As ready as I'll ever be. As they exited the car, Samantha broke away from her father, running towards them with the uninhibited enthusiasm of youth. "You found her," she exclaimed, stopping short in front of Claire. "Are you really Claire? The one from the picture?" Claire knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the little girl. "I am," she said softly. "And you must be Samantha. I've heard a lot about you." Samantha's eyes widened. "Did you know my mummy? Were you friends?" And the innocent question hit Claire like a physical blow. She glanced up at George, who had approached more slowly, his face a mask of complex emotions. "I didn't know your mummy personally," Claire said carefully, "but I think we might have been fighting the same battle." George cleared his throat, extending his hand to Claire. "It's good to finally meet you, Claire. I wish the circumstances were different." Claire stood, shaking his hand. "I'm so sorry about Anna," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But if I had known, if there was anything I could have done." George shook his head. "You couldn't have known. None of us could have. What matters now is that we find the truth and make sure no one else suffers the same fate." As they made their way inside, Detective Brandon greeted them, his face grim. "Glad you made it safely," he said, ushering them into the living room, where a team of FBI agents was waiting. "We've got a lot to discuss." The next few hours were a whirlwind of debriefings and strategy sessions. Claire recounted everything she knew about the organization, every detail she had uncovered before her disappearance. The FBI agents cross-referenced her information with their own findings, building a complex web of connections and criminal activities. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the safe house, the lead FBI agent, Sarah Reeves, called for a break. "We've made good progress," she said, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "But we're still missing some key pieces of the puzzle." Claire, who had been quiet for the past hour, suddenly spoke up. "I might know where to find those pieces," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "There's a backup drive. I hid it before I disappeared. Insurance in case anything happened to me." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Claire. Agent Reeves leaned forward, her expression intense. "Where is this drive, Claire?" Claire took a deep breath. "In a storage unit just outside the city. I've been paying for it anonymously all this time. No one knows about it but me." Detective Brandon exchanged glances with Agent Reeves. "We need to retrieve that drive," he said. "Tonight." As plans were made for a covert operation to recover the backup drive, Emma pulled Claire aside. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, searching her daughter's face. "Once we do this, there's no going back." Claire nodded, a fire in her eyes that Emma hadn't seen in years. "I'm sure, Mom. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid. It's time to end this once and for all." As night fell, a small team consisting of Claire, Detective Brandon, and 2 FBI agents set out for the storage facility. The drive was tense, the car filled with a palpable sense of anticipation and dread. At the storage facility, Claire led them to a nondescript unit at the back of the complex. Her hand shook as she inputted the access code, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet night. Inside, buried beneath a pile of old furniture and boxes, was a small fireproof safe. Claire quickly retrieved it, cradling it in her arms like a precious child. "Is that it?" Detective Brandon asked, his voice low and urgent. Claire nodded. "Everything I found, everything that made me run, it's all in here." As they made their way back to the car, a sense of unease settled over the group. They were exposed, vulnerable. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat. They were halfway to the car when it happened. A figure stepped out from behind a nearby unit, the streetlight glinting off the barrel of a gun. Well, a familiar voice drawled. "Look who finally came out of hiding." Claire's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Robert Kelly, one of the key players in the organization she'd uncovered. the man who had threatened her all those years ago. Detective Brandon moved to draw his weapon, but Kelly's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Detective. My associates have this place surrounded. One wrong move, and this little reunion gets very messy very quickly." Claire's mind raced. How had they found them? Who would leak the information? As if reading her thoughts, Kelly chuckled. "You didn't think we'd just let you walk away, did you, Claire? We've been watching, waiting. And now you've led us right to the evidence. How convenient." Claire clutched the safe tighter, her heart pounding. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The FBI knows everything. It's over, Robert." Holly's smile was cold, predatory. "Oh, I think you'll find it's far from over. In fact, I'd say the real game is just beginning." Suddenly, the night erupted into chaos. Gunshots rang out, bullets whizzing past with terrifying proximity. Claire felt someone grab her arm, pulling her down behind a nearby car. "Stay down!" Detective Brandon yelled, returning fire over the hood of the vehicle. Claire's world narrowed to the sound of gunfire and the cold metal of the safe pressed against her chest. She thought of her mother, of George and Samantha, waiting back at the safe house. She thought of Anna, who had died trying to expose the truth. In that moment, Claire made a decision. With a deep breath, she army-crawled to the edge of the car, the safe clutched tightly in one hand. In a lull between volleys of gunfire, she made her move. "Hey, Robert," she shouted, standing up. "You want the evidence? Come and get it." With all her strength, Claire hurled the safe over the heads of the gunmen, watching as it sailed through the air and landed with a splash in the storage facility's decorative pond. For a moment, everything stopped. Then, chaos erupted anew as Kelly's men raced towards the pond. In the confusion, Detective Brandon and the FBI agents seized their opportunity, overpowering the distracted gunmen. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of backup, Claire sank to the ground, her adrenaline fading. Detective Brandon knelt beside her, his face a mixture of awe and concern. "That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen," he said, helping her to her feet. "Are you all right?" Claire nodded, watching as Kelly was led away in handcuffs, his face contorted with rage. I think I finally will be," she said softly. So the scene was secured and statements were taken. Claire found herself wondering about the future. For so long, her world had been defined by fear and secrecy. Now, standing under the open sky, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, and likely more dangers to face. But for the first time in 3 years, Claire felt hope. She had faced her demons, stood up to her tormentors, and she hadn't done it alone. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Claire turned to Detective Brandon. "Can we go home now?" she asked, a voice tinged with exhaustion and longing. I think I'm ready to start living again." Brandon nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, Claire, let's go home." As they drove back to the safe house, Claire felt a sense of peace washing over her. The road ahead would be challenging, but with her mother George, Samantha, and the support of those who had fought to bring her home, she knew she could face whatever came next. In the Phoenix skyline loomed before them, no longer a symbol of fear but of new beginnings. Claire Scott was coming home, ready to reclaim her life and help bring justice to those who had tried to silence her. The dawn of a new day was breaking, and with it, the promise of a future free from shadows. The days following the dramatic confrontation at the storage facility were a whirlwind of activity. Claire found herself at the center of a storm of debriefings, interviews and emotional reunions. The safe house became a hub of constant movement, with FBI agents coming and going at all hours, piecing together the vast network of Claire's evidence had exposed. Emma rarely left her daughter's side, as if afraid that Claire might disappear again if she looked away for too long. The depth of their bond, tested by years of separation and secrecy, seemed to have only grown stronger. They spent long hours talking, crying, and simply holding each other, making up for lost time. George and Samantha had become fixtures in their lives as well. The shared trauma of their experiences had forged an unlikely family unit. Samantha, in particular, had taken to Claire with an enthusiasm that both warmed and broke Claire's heart. A little girl's innocence and resilience in the face of such upheaval was a constant reminder of why they were fighting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the safe house's living room, Claire found herself alone with George for the first time. Samantha had finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled up asleep on the couch, while Emma was in deep discussion with Agent Reeves in the kitchen. "How are you holding up?" George asked softly, his eyes filled with concern. Claire sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Honestly, I'm not sure. It's all so overwhelming. For so long, my entire existence was focused on staying hidden, staying alive. Now I don't know who I am anymore." George nodded, understanding etched in the lines of his face. "I can't imagine what you've been through, Claire. But for what it's worth, I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." A wry smile tugged at Claire's lips. "Brave or just stupidly reckless?" "Both, maybe," George chuckled. Then his expression grew serious. "You know, when I first learned about you, about what you'd uncovered, I was angry. I thought if you had come forward sooner, maybe Anna." Claire's heart clenched. "George, I'm so sorry. If I had known about Anna, about what was happening to her, I would have." George held up a hand, stopping her. "I know. That's what I'm trying to say. I understand now why you did what you did. And I'm grateful. Your sacrifice, your evidence, it's going to bring Anna justice. It's going to keep Samantha safe." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "I just wish I could have done more." George reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. Now it's time to focus on healing, on building a future." As if on cue, Samantha stirred on the couch, her sleepy voice breaking the moment. "Daddy? Claire? Can we have ice cream?" Claire couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the moment broken. "I think we've all earned some ice cream, don't you?" As they made their way to the kitchen, Claire felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. This makeshift family, born from tragedy and bound by shared purpose, was becoming her anchor in the storm of uncertainty that surrounded her. The following morning brought a new challenge. Detective Brandon arrived early, his face grim. "Claire," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we need to talk." Claire felt her stomach drop. She'd come to trust Brandon over the past few days, but the seriousness in his eyes sent a chill down her spine. "What is it?" she asked, following him to a quiet corner of the house. Brandon took a deep breath. "The FBI has been analyzing the data you provided. It's bigger than we thought. The corruption goes higher than anyone imagined. Judges, politicians, even some within the Bureau itself." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. "What does that mean for us, for the case?" "That means we have to be even more careful," Brandon replied. "The people we're up against, they have resources we can't even imagine. They'll stop at nothing to keep this from coming to light." As the implications of Brandon's words sank in, Claire felt the familiar tendrils of fear creeping back. But this time, instead of the paralyzing terror that had driven her into hiding, she felt a steely resolve taking root. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice steady. Brandon's eyes met hers, a glimmer of admiration shining through his concern. "We fight. But we have to be smart about it. The FBI is putting together a task force, bringing in agents from other field offices who've been vetted. We need to move you and your family to a more secure location." Claire nodded, her mind already racing. "What about George and Samantha? They're a part of this now too." "They'll come with us," Brandon assured her. "We're not leaving anyone behind." As they rejoined the others to break the news, Claire was struck by the gravity of the situation. The lives of everyone she cared about had been irrevocably changed by her actions. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. Emma, sensing her daughter's distress, pulled Claire into a fierce embrace. "We're in this together," she whispered fiercely. "All of us. Don't you dare start thinking you have to face this alone." George nodded in agreement. Samantha clutched tightly in his arms. "We're stronger together," he added. "Whatever comes next, we face it as a family." As they packed their meager belongings, preparing for yet another upheaval, Claire found herself watching Samantha. The little girl was carefully wrapping a framed photo of her mother, her small face scrunched in concentration. "You okay, sweetie?" Claire asked gently, kneeling beside her. Samantha looked up, her eyes wide and serious. "Is the bad man who hurt my mommy going to hurt us too?" Claire's heart broke at the fear in the child's voice. She took Samantha's hands in hers, choosing her words carefully. "There are some bad people who might try to scare us," she said, "but there are a lot more good people who are working very hard to keep us safe. And you know what? We're going to help them. We're going to be brave just like your mommy was." Samantha nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around Claire's neck. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "You make Daddy smile again." Claire held the little girl tightly, feeling a fierce protectiveness surge through her. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she would do whatever it took to see this through, to ensure that Samantha and all the other innocents caught in this web of corruption would have a chance at a better future. As they loaded into the convoy of unmarked vehicles that would take them to their new safe house, Claire took one last look at the Phoenix skyline. This city had been her home, the backdrop to both her happiest memories and her darkest fears. Now, as they drove away, she felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, and challenges she couldn't even begin to imagine. But for the first time in years, Claire didn't feel alone. Surrounded by the unlikely family fate had brought together, she felt ready to face whatever came next. As the city faded into the distance, Claire made a silent promise to herself, to her mother, to George and Samantha, and to the memory of Anna. She would see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The truth would come to light, justice would be served, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would all find a way to heal and build a new life from the ashes of the old. The sun was setting as they drove, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Claire watched the changing landscape, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever tomorrow might bring, for now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. The new safe house was a sprawling ranch-style home nestled in the foothills of a mountain range, miles from the nearest town. As they pulled up the long, winding driveway, Brandon's face was a mask of concentration, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Welcome to your home for the foreseeable future," he said, his voice tight with tension. "It's not much, but it's secure. We've got agents patrolling the perimeter 24/7. As they settled into their new surroundings, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the house, every rustle in the surrounding woods, set her nerves on edge. She found herself checking and rechecking the locks, drawing curtains closed, always looking over her shoulder. It was on their third night in the safe house that Brandon pulled Claire aside, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said, leading her to the back porch where they could speak privately. Claire's heart raced. "What is it? Has something happened?" Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." As Brandon spoke, Claire felt the world tilt beneath her feet. He revealed a past she could never have imagined, years spent undercover, infiltrating the organization they were now fighting against. His work had brought him dangerously close to the inner circle, privy to secrets that could bring down empires. "I never meant to get so deep," Brandon confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "But the deeper I got, the more I realized how far the corruption spread. I couldn't just walk away." Claire listened in stunned silence, her mind reeling. "Why are you telling me this now?" she finally managed to ask. Brandon's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. because you deserve to know the truth, and because I think my past might be the key to bringing this whole thing down." As Brandon laid out his plan, a daring scheme to use his old connections to set up a sting operation, Claire felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. It was risky, potentially catastrophic if anything went wrong, but it might be their best chance at exposing the truth once and for all. "We can't tell the others," Brandon said, his voice firm. "The fewer people who know, the safer everyone will be." Claire nodded, the weight of this new secret settling heavily on her shoulders. As she looked back at the house, where her mother, George, and Samantha slept peacefully, she felt a pang of guilt. More lies, more deception. But if it meant keeping them safe, if it meant finally bringing down the corrupt system that had stolen so much from them all, wasn't it worth it? Over the next few days, Claire found herself caught in a delicate balancing act. By day, she played the role of the recovering victim, participating in therapy sessions and helping Samantha with her schoolwork. By night, she and Brandon huddled over maps and documents, piecing together a plan that could either save them all or destroy everything they'd fought for. The strain began to show. Emma noticed the dark circles under her daughter's eyes, the way Claire would sometimes zone out mid-conversation. "Sweetheart, are you sure you're okay?" she asked one morning, her voice laced with concern. Claire forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mum. Just still adjusting, you know. It's a lot to process." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but Claire pushed the guilt aside. Soon, she told herself, soon this would all be over and there would be no more need for secrets. As the days turned into weeks, the safe house began to feel less like a refuge and more like a prison. The constant vigilance, the forced inactivity, wore on everyone's nerves. Tensions began to rise, small arguments erupting over trivial matters. It was during one of these tense moments, as George and Emma bickered over dinner preparations, that Samantha tugged on Claire's sleeve. "Can we go outside?" she asked, her eyes pleading. "Just for a little bit." Claire hesitated, glancing at Brandon. He gave a small nod, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay within sight of the house," he warned. As they stepped into the fading sunlight, Claire felt some of the tension leave her body. Samantha ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, her laughter a reminder of the innocence they were fighting to protect. It happened in an instant. A flash of movement in the trees, a glint of metal in the dying light. Claire's body reacted before her mind could process what was happening. She lunged forward, tackling Samantha to the ground just as a shot rang out, the bullet whistling past where the little girl's head had been moments before. Chaos erupted. Brandon was there in seconds, returning fire as he shouted for them to get back to the house. Claire scooped Samantha into her arms, running for safety as more shots echoed through the air. As they huddled inside, the sound of gunfire gradually fading, Claire held a trembling Samantha close. The reality of their situation hit her with brutal clarity. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. This was war, and they were on the front lines. The aftermath of the shooting was a blur of activity. FBI agents swarmed the property, securing the perimeter and combing the surrounding woods for any trace of the attackers. Inside the safe house, an atmosphere of barely contained panic reigned. Emma clung to Claire, her face pale with shock. "How did they find us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought we were safe here." Claire wished she had an answer, but the truth was she was just as bewildered and frightened as her mother. She glanced at Brandon, who was in deep conversation with Agent Reeves, their faces grim. George paced the living room, Samantha curled up asleep in his arms, exhausted from the ordeal. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice tight with tension. "It's not safe anymore." Claire knew he was right. The illusion of security they had built over the past weeks had been shattered in an instant. But where could they go? Who could they trust? As if reading her thoughts, Brandon approached the group, his face set in determined lines. "We're moving you to a new location," he announced. "A place that's off the grid, known only to a select few within the Bureau." How can we be sure it's really secure? George challenged, his protective instincts in full force. How do we know there isn't another leak? Brandon's jaw tightened, but he met George's gaze steadily. Because I'm the one who set it up, he said. Years ago, when I was deep undercover, it's a failsafe that even my handlers didn't know about. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications. Claire could see the questions in her mother's eyes, the suspicion in George's. But there was no time for explanations or debates. We leave in an hour, Brandon continued. Pack only what you absolutely need. Where we're going will be completely cut off from the outside world. As they scrambled to gather their belongings, Claire pulled Brandon aside. Are you sure about this? She asked in a low voice. If this place is so secret, won't it look suspicious if you suddenly take us there? Brandon's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of determination and something else, fear perhaps? It's a risk we have to take, he said. I've set things in motion, Claire. The sting operation we planned, it's happening. And when it does, all hell is going to break loose. Claire felt her heart rate quicken. When? She asked. 2 days from now, Brandon replied, which is why we need to get you all somewhere completely secure. What's coming? It's going to shake the foundations of this country. The gravity of his words settled over Claire like a heavy cloak. This was it, the culmination of years of secrets, lies and sacrifice. The chance to finally bring down the corrupt system that had stolen so much from them all. As they loaded into a nondescript van, Claire found herself seated next to George, Samantha asleep between them. The little girl's peaceful face was a stark contrast to the tension that filled the vehicle. Are you okay? Claire asked softly, noticing the tight set of George's jaw. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a storm of emotions. I don't know, he admitted. I keep thinking about Anna, about how she died trying to expose the truth. And now here we are, running again, hiding again. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. Claire reached out, gently squeezing his hand. It has to be, she said. For Samantha, for all the other families who've been hurt by these people. We have to believe that the truth will win out in the end. George nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. You're right, he said, and I'm glad we're in this together. As the van wound its way through dark, unfamiliar roads, Claire found her mind drifting to the future. What would life look like after all this was over? Could they ever truly feel safe again? Hours passed, the landscape outside the windows changing from city to suburbs to wilderness. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, they arrived at their destination. The safe house, if it could be called that, was a sprawling underground bunker built into the side of a mountain. As Brandon led them through the heavy steel doors, Claire couldn't help but feel like they were entering another world. Welcome to the Foxhole, Brandon said, his voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. This place was designed to withstand just about anything: nuclear war, natural disasters, you name it. As they explored their new surroundings, the living quarters, the fully stocked kitchen, the communications center filled with advanced technology, Claire felt a mixture of awe and unease. This place was a fortress, but it was also a prison. For how long would they be confined here? Later, as the others settled into their rooms, Claire found Brandon in the communications center, poring over a stack of documents. What happens now? She asked, sinking into a chair beside him. Brandon looked up, the weight of responsibility clear in his eyes. Now we wait, he said. In 48 hours, the biggest sting operation in FBI history will be underway. And if all goes according to plan, we'll have enough evidence to bring down hundreds of corrupt officials, expose the entire network. And if it doesn't go according to plan? Claire pressed. Brandon's silence was answer enough. As Claire lay in bed that night, sleep eluding her, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The fear, the loneliness, the constant looking over her shoulder, it had all led to this moment. She thought about her mother, finally sleeping peacefully in the next room. About George and Samantha, innocent victims caught in a web of corruption and deceit. about Anna, who had given her life in pursuit of the truth. And she thought about Brandon, the man who had lived a double life for years, sacrificing everything for a chance at justice. In 2 days, their fate, and possibly the fate of the entire country, would be decided. As Claire finally drifted off to sleep, she made a silent vow. Whatever happened, whatever the cost, she would see this through to the end. For herself, for her family, and for all those who had been silenced by the very system meant to protect them. The countdown had begun. In the depths of the mountain, hidden from the world, a small group of unlikely heroes prepared for a battle that would shape the future of their nation. The truth was coming to light, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next 48 hours in the foxhole were a study in controlled chaos. Brandon was in constant communication with his FBI contacts, coordinating the final details of the operation. Claire found herself acting as a bridge between Brandon and the others, trying to keep everyone calm and informed without revealing too much. Emma, ever the nurturer, took charge of keeping everyone fed and as comfortable as possible in their underground sanctuary. George focused on Samantha, creating a semblance of normalcy for the little girl with improvised games and stories. As the hours ticked by, the tension in the bunker grew palpable. Claire could see it in the tight set of Brandon's shoulders, in the worried glances her mother kept throwing her way, in the way George held Samantha just a little tighter than usual. On the morning of the operation, Brandon gathered everyone in the main living area. His face was grave, the weight of what was to come evident in every line. "Today's the day," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "In a few hours, we'll be witnessing the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in U.S. history. Hundreds of arrests will be made simultaneously across the country. Judges, politicians, high-ranking law enforcement officials, no one is immune." Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "My God," she whispered, "is it really that widespread?" Brandon nodded grimly. "The corruption runs deeper than anyone could have imagined. But today we start tearing it out by the roots." George, his arm protectively around Samantha, leaned forward. "What does this mean for us? For our safety?" "If all goes according to plan," Brandon replied, "it means you'll finally be able to come out of hiding. The people who've been threatening you, hunting you, they'll be behind bars." Claire felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by caution. "And if it doesn't go according to plan?" But Brandon's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. "Then we've got contingency plans. But let's focus on the positive for now." As Brandon turned to leave, Claire followed him to the communications center. "What aren't you telling them?" she asked quietly once they were alone. Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The risk," he admitted. "If even one person gets tipped off, if one arrest goes wrong, it could set off a chain reaction. We could be looking at armed resistance, destruction of evidence on a massive scale." Claire felt her heart race. "Is there anything we can do from here?" Brandon shook his head. "We've done our part. Now we wait." The next few hours were excruciating. They gathered around the bank of monitors in the communications center, watching news feeds and listening to encrypted radio chatter. At first there was nothing out of the ordinary. Then, all at once, everything exploded into action. Breaking news alerts began popping up on every channel. Reports of high-profile arrests flooded in from across the country. Claire watched in awe as familiar faces, politicians she'd seen on TV, judges whose names she recognized, were led away in handcuffs. "It's working," Emma breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They're really doing it." But even as hope began to blossom, Claire noticed Brandon's frown deepening. He was focused intently on one of the smaller monitors, showing a feed from what looked like a body camera. "What is it?" Claire asked, moving closer. "Something's wrong," Brandon muttered. "This team, they should have secured the target by now." As they watched, the image on the screen suddenly erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the speakers, the camera view jerking wildly as the agent wearing it dove for cover. Damn it. Brandon slammed his fist on the desk. They were waiting for them. Someone tipped them off. The next hour was a blur of frantic activity. Brandon was on secure lines, coordinating with teams in the field, trying to contain the situation. Claire did her best to keep the others calm, but as reports of armed resistance and fleeing suspects continued to pour in, she felt her own composure slipping. It was George who finally voiced what they were all thinking. "This isn't over, is it?" he asked, his voice low. "Even with all these arrests, there are still people out there who want to keep us quiet." Brandon, looking exhausted and defeated, could only nod. "I'm afraid so. We've dealt them a major blow, but in operation this size, there are bound to be loose ends." As the initial frenzy of the operation died down, a heavy silence settled over the bunker. They had achieved something monumental, exposed corruption at the highest levels of government and law enforcement. But the cost was yet to be determined. Late that night, unable to sleep, Claire found herself wandering the silent corridors of the foxhole. She paused outside Samantha's room, peering in to see the little girl sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding her. "She deserves better than this," a voice said softly behind her. Claire turned to see George, his eyes tired but filled with a fierce protectiveness. "We all do," Claire replied. "But thanks to what happened today, maybe she'll have a chance at a better future." George nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You know, when I first learned about you, about what you'd uncovered, I was so angry. I blamed you for what happened to Anna, but now I understand, and I'm grateful." Claire felt tears prick at her eyes. "I just wish I could have done more sooner. Maybe if I had." "Hey," George said gently, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "You can't think like that. Anna would be proud of what we've accomplished, what you've accomplished." As they stood there in the dim light of the hallway, Claire felt something shift between them. A connection born of shared trauma and mutual understanding that ran deeper than she'd realized. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Brandon appeared around the corner, his face a mask of determination. "We need to talk," he said. "All of us. I've just received some information that changes everything." As they gathered once again in the main living area, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something momentous. Whatever Brandon was about to reveal, she knew their lives would never be the same. Looking around at the faces of her unlikely family, her mother, strong and resilient George, protective and caring Samantha, innocent and full of hope, and Brandon, complex and dedicated, Claire felt a surge of strength. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As Brandon began to speak, laying out the new information and the challenges that lay ahead, Claire made a silent vow. They had come too far, sacrificed too much to give up now. The fight for justice, for truth, for a better world, it was far from over. But they were ready. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as Claire looked at the determined faces around her, she knew that they had the strength to see it through. The truth had begun to come to light, and they would not rest until it shone for all to see. Dear readers, if you've been captivated by the twists and turns of this gripping tale, if you found yourself invested in the struggles of Claire, Emma, Aish, Samantha, and Brandon, we invite you to show your support. Your engagement means the world to us and helps us continue crafting stories that resonate with your hearts and minds. If you've enjoyed this journey and would like to hear more stories like this, please leave a comment with the number 1. Your feedback is our guiding light, illuminating the path for future narratives that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Together, let's continue this adventure into the realms of suspense, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The revelation Brandon shared that night shook the foundations of everything they thought they knew. That a mole had been discovered within the highest ranks of the FBI, someone who had been feeding information to the corrupt network they were fighting against. This explained the armed resistance during the raids and the suspects who had managed to slip away. "We're not just fighting against corrupt officials anymore," Brandon explained, his voice tight with tension. "We're up against a shadow government, a network so deeply entrenched that it's been operating right under our noses for decades." The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Emma, her face pale, reached for Claire's hand. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, voicing the fear they all felt. Brandon's eyes were grim as he surveyed the group. "It means we're not out of the woods yet. Not by a long shot. The people we're up against, they have resources we can't even imagine. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves and their interests." George, who had been silently absorbing the information, finally spoke up. "So what's our next move? We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us." Brandon nodded, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "You're right. We need to go on the offensive. I have a plan, but it's risky. It involves using Claire as bait." The room erupted into chaos at his words. Emma vehemently protested, while George demanded explanations. Claire, however, remained silent, her mind racing with the implications of Brandon's suggestion. When the commotion died down, Claire finally spoke. "Tell me more," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Brandon laid out his plan. They would leak information about Claire's whereabouts, drawing out their enemies. But instead of Claire, it would be Brandon in disguise, wired and ready to gather crucial evidence. The real Claire would be safely hidden, coordinating with a trusted team of FBI agents. "It's dangerous," Brandon admitted, "but if we can pull it off, we'll have irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy, enough to bring down the entire network." The debate raged for hours. Emma was vehemently against putting Claire in any kind of danger, while George saw the potential in the plan but worried about the risks. Samantha, who had been quietly listening from the corner, suddenly spoke up. "You have to do it," she said, her young voice filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "For my mom, and for everyone else they've hurt, you have to make them pay." Her words seemed to settle something in the room. One by one, they all agreed to the plan, albeit with heavy hearts and lingering doubts. The next few days were a flurry of preparation. Brandon worked tirelessly to coordinate with his most trusted contacts in the FBI, setting up secure communication channels and planning for every contingency. Claire threw herself into learning everything she could about the operation, determined to play her part to perfection. Emma and George focused on preparing Samantha for what was to come. They couldn't shield her entirely from the danger, but they did their best to make her feel safe and loved. The night before the operation was set to begin, Claire found herself unable to sleep. She wandered the quiet halls of the foxhole, eventually making her way to the main living area. To her surprise, she found George already there, staring pensively at a photo of Anna. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly, settling into the chair across from him. George looked up, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Just thinking about Anna, about what she would say if she could see us now." Claire felt a pang of guilt. "She'd be proud of you, of how you've protected Samantha through all of this." "She'd be proud of you too," George replied. "Your courage, your determination, it's incredible, Claire." There was a moment of charged silence between them, years of shared pain and mutual understanding hanging in the air. Slowly, almost hesitantly, George reached out and took Claire's hand in his. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know that I'm grateful. For everything you've done, for the sacrifices you've made. And I care about you, Claire. For more than I thought possible after Anna." Claire felt her heart race, a mix of fear and something else, hope or perhaps coursing through her. "George, But whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Brandon appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "It's time," he said. "We need to move now. Our window of opportunity just got a lot smaller." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Final preparations were made, goodbyes were said. Emma held Claire tightly, whispering words of love and encouragement. Samantha, trying to be brave, gave Claire a hand-drawn picture for luck. As Claire prepared to leave with the FBI team, George pulled her aside one last time. Without a word, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, pouring all his fear, hope, and unspoken feelings into that one gesture. "Come back to us," he whispered as they parted. "Promise me." Claire nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. With one last look at her family, Emma, George, Samantha, and Brandon, she stepped out of the foxhole and into the unknown. The plan was set in motion. Information about Claire's supposed whereabouts was leaked through carefully chosen channels. Brandon, disguised as Claire, took his position. The real Claire, hidden away in a secure location, coordinated with the FBI team, her heart pounding with every passing minute. Hours passed with no activity. Then, suddenly, everything exploded into action. Their targets took the bait, converging on Brandon's location. Through video feeds, Claire watched as the operation unfolded, her breath caught in her throat. It was working. They were gathering evidence, catching their enemies red-handed. Victory seemed within reach. But then, in a heart-stopping moment, something went wrong. A burst of gunfire abetted on one of the feeds. Claire heard Brandon's voice, tight with pain, calling for backup. In that moment, Claire made a decision that would change everything. Against all protocols, against every promise she'd made, she left her secure location. She couldn't let Brandon face this alone, couldn't let him sacrifice himself for her cause. As she raced towards the scene, her mind filled with images of her mother, of George and Samantha. She thought of the kiss, of the future that had seemed possible just hours ago. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the night air, "but I have to finish this." With determination burning in her eyes, Claire Scott stepped into the fray, ready to face whatever came next. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of not just her family, but of justice itself, hung in the balance. The night air was thick with tension as Claire raced towards the sound of gunfire. The heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew she was breaking every rule, violating every safety protocol, but the thought of Brandon in danger overrode all other considerations. As she approached the warehouse where the operation was unfolding, Claire could hear the chaos intensifying. The staccato bursts of gunfire were punctuated by shouts and the wail of distant sirens. She crouched behind a parked car, trying to assess the situation. Through the warehouse's grimy windows, she could see flashes of movement and muzzle flares. Her eyes desperately scanned for any sign of Brandon. Where was he? Was he hurt? The uncertainty was agonizing. Suddenly, a figure burst through a side door of the warehouse, stumbling and clearly injured. Even in the dim light, Claire recognized Brandon's disguise. Without hesitation, she sprinted towards him. "So Brandon," she called out, reaching his side just as he collapsed against a stack of crates. His eyes widened in shock and anger when he saw her. "Claire, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be safe." "I couldn't let you face this alone," she said, quickly assessing his injuries. A bullet had grazed his arm, and he was losing blood fast. "We need to get you out of here." The Brandon shook his head, gritting his teeth against the pain. "No, you don't understand. It's a trap." Somehow they knew it wasn't really you. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. If they had seen through their ruse, then the entire operation was compromised. And worse, it meant there was a traitor in their midst, someone who had leaked the true nature of their plan. Before she could respond, a new volley of gunfire erupted from the warehouse. Claire instinctively threw herself over Brandon, shielding him as bullets whistled overhead. "We have to move," she said urgently, already plotting their escape route. "Can you walk?" Brandon nodded grimly, allowing Claire to help him to his feet. Together they stumbled towards the cover of a nearby alleyway, the sound of pursuit close behind them. As they navigated the maze of back streets, Claire's mind raced. Who could have betrayed them? And more pressingly, how were they going to get out of this alive? Their answer came in the form of a nondescript van that screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The side door slid open, revealing a face Claire never expected to see again. "Get in," George shouted, reaching out to help them. Claire hesitated for a split second, her instincts warring with her desperate need for help. But one look at Brandon's pale face made the decision for her. They clambered into the van, which peeled away just as their pursuers rounded the corner. "How did you find us?" Claire asked, breathless as she helped Brandon into a more comfortable position. George's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, a mix of relief and something else. Anger? Fear, swirling in their depths. "I placed a tracker on you before you left," he admitted. "I had a feeling you might do something reckless." Claire didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. Before she could decide, Brandon's pained voice cut through her thoughts. "We've been compromised," he said, wincing as Claire applied pressure to his wound. "Someone on the inside tipped them off about the true nature of our operation." George's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I was afraid of that. That's why I came alone. We can't trust anyone right now." As they sped through the night, Claire filled George in on what had happened. His face grew grimmer with each detail. "So what's our next move?" Claire asked, looking between George and Brandon. "We can't go back to the foxhole, it's not safe." Brandon nodded weakly. "I have a safe house. Off the books. Not even my handlers know about it." George raised an eyebrow. "Can we trust it?" "We don't have much choice," Brandon replied. "It's our best option right now." As they drove, following Brandon's labored directions, Claire couldn't help but think of her mother and Samantha, still hidden away in the foxhole. But were they safe? Had the traitor already gotten to them? The fears must have shown on her face because George reached back and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "They're safe," he said softly. "I made sure of it before I left. Emma and Samantha are with a team I personally vetted. They'll be moved to a new location by now." Claire felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Despite everything, George had a thought of their family first. She squeezed his hand back, a silent thank you passing between them. The safe house turned out to be a rustic cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. As they helped Brandon inside, Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. How many times would they have to run to hide? So once Brandon was settled, his wound properly treated with the cabin's well-stocked first aid kit, the three of them gathered around the small kitchen table. The gravity of their situation hung heavy in the air. "We need to figure out who the mole is," Claire said, breaking the tense silence. "Until we do, we can't trust anyone." Brandon nodded grimly. "I've been going over it in my head. The list of people who knew the full details of our operation is very short. It has to be someone high up in the bureau." George leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Could it be your handler? The one who's been coordinating everything?" Brandon's face paled at the suggestion, but Claire could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Jim Reeves," he said slowly. "She had access to everything. And now that I think about it, there were times when things didn't quite add up." "So what do we do?" Claire asked. "We can't just accuse a high-ranking FBI agent of being a mole without proof." "We get proof," George said firmly. "We draw her out, make her reveal herself." As they began to formulate a plan, Claire couldn't help but marvel at the unlikely trio they made: a former graphic designer turned whistleblower, an undercover FBI agent, and a grieving widower. And each of them had been touched by the corruption they were fighting. Each had lost something precious. But together they might just have a chance at bringing the truth to light. The plan they devised was daring, perhaps even foolhardy. They would use Claire as bait once again, but this time they would be the ones setting the trap. It was risky, but as Brandon pointed out, they were out of options. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the cabin windows, they finalized the details of their scheme. Claire felt a mixture of fear and determination coursing through her. This could be their last chance to expose the truth, to bring down the corrupt system that had stolen so much from them all. George, sensing her turmoil, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together," he said softly. "Whatever happens, we face it as a family." Family. The word resonated deeply within Claire. She thought of her mother, of Samantha, of the bond that had formed between all of them through this ordeal. And she thought of George, of the unspoken feelings growing between them, of the future that might be possible if they survived this. With renewed determination, Claire nodded. "Let's do this," she said. "Let's finish what we started." As they began to put their plan into motion, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The next few days would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of the entire country. The truth was within their grasp, and they would stop at nothing to bring it to light. Little did they know that their actions were about to set off a chain of events that would shake the foundations of power to its very core. The final battle was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. The plan was set in motion with a carefully orchestrated leak. Claire's location was accidentally revealed through channels they knew Agent Reeves monitored. The bait was set. Now all they had to do was wait. The cabin became a hive of activity as they prepared for every possible scenario. Brandon, still weak from his injury, but driven by a fierce determination, coordinated with his most trusted contacts in the FBI. George transformed the rustic living room into a command center, setting up surveillance equipment and communication devices. Claire found herself in the unfamiliar role of strategist, her years of hiding and observing now proving invaluable as she anticipated their enemies' moves. The weight of what they were about to attempt hung heavy on all of them. But there was also a sense of exhilaration. For the first time in years, they were taking control of their fate. As night fell, bringing with it a tense silence, Claire sat outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The cool air helped clear her head, but it did little to calm the storm of emotions raging within her. She heard the cabin door open and close softly behind her. Jorge's presence was a warm comfort as he came to stand beside her. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. Claire shook her head. "No, not exactly. It's just all of this. It still feels surreal sometimes. 3 years ago, I was just a graphic designer with a normal life. Now I'm at the center of a conspiracy that could bring down the government." George chuckled softly, but there was understanding in his eyes. "Life has a way of throwing us curveballs, doesn't it? And I never imagined I'd be here either. After Anna died, I thought my life was over. But now..." He trailed off, his gaze meeting Claire's. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. "George," Claire began, but she was cut off by Brandon's urgent voice from inside the cabin. "We've got movement. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south." The moment shattered, Claire and George rushed back inside. Brandon was hunched over a laptop, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. 4 SUVs, heavily tinted windows. Classic government issue, he reported grimly. "They'll be here in 10 minutes tops." Claire felt her heart rate quicken. This was it. Everything they had planned, everything they had sacrificed, came down to the next few hours. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Let's get into position. Remember, we need to let them think they have the upper hand. We need Reeves to reveal herself." As George and Brandon moved to their designated spots, Claire took a deep breath, centering herself. She thought of her mother, of Samantha, of all the lives that had been destroyed by the corruption they were fighting. Their faces gave her strength, steeling her resolve. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Then, suddenly, everything exploded into action. So the sound of car doors slamming, of footsteps crunching on gravel, filled the air. "FBI. Claire Scott, come out with your hands up." Claire exchanged a quick glance with George, who was hidden nearby. This was not part of the plan. Reeves was supposed to come in quietly, not with a full tactical team. "Improvise," George mouthed silently. Nodding, Claire stepped towards the cabin door. "I'm coming out," she called. "Don't shoot." As she emerged, hands raised, she was momentarily blinded by flashlights. When her vision cleared, she found herself facing a line of armed agents, with Agent Reeves front and center. "Claire Scott," Reeves said, her voice cold. "You've led us on quite a chase. It ends now." Claire studied the agent's face, searching for any sign of the corruption they suspected. But Reeves' expression was a mask of professional detachment. "Agent Reeves," Claire replied, fighting to keep her voice steady, "I'm glad it's you. There's something you need to know. The corruption, it goes higher than you think. I have proof." "Save it," Reeves cut her off. "You'll have plenty of time to spin your tales in interrogation." "Cuff her," she ordered one of the other agents. As the agent approached, Claire felt a moment of panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Where was Brandon? Where was the evidence they needed? Just as the cold metal of the handcuffs touched her wrists, a voice rang out from the darkness. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sarah." Brandon emerged from the shadows, his gun trained on Reeves. The other agents immediately raised their weapons, creating a tense standoff. "Brandon." Reeves' composure slipped for a moment, genuine surprise crossing her features. "What are you doing?" "Stand down." "I don't think so," Brandon replied. "Not until you explain why you've been feeding information to the very people we're supposed to be taking down." Reeves' eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're making a big mistake, Brandon." "Am I?" Brandon challenged. "Then explain why every operation I've run in the past year has been compromised. Explain the offshore accounts in your name. Explain the encrypted messages we intercepted between you and known members of the conspiracy." As Brandon spoke, Claire could see the change in Reeves' demeanor. The professional mask slipped, replaced by a cold fury. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Reeves hissed. "The people I work for, they control everything. And do you think your little evidence will make a difference? They'll bury it just like they've buried everything else." It was the confession they needed, but Claire realized with growing horror that Reeves wasn't going to come quietly. The agent's hand was inching towards her weapon. "Now," Claire shouted. In an instant, the night exploded into chaos. George and the team of trusted FBI agents they had stationed in the woods burst into action. Flashbangs detonated, filling the air with noise and confusion. Claire dove for cover as gunfire erupted around her. She could hear Brandon shouting orders, trying to subdue Reeves and her loyal agents without bloodshed. Through the chaos, Claire locked eyes with George. He nodded, signaling that their backup plan was in motion. Somewhere in the woods, a secure uplink was transmitting everything. Reeves' confession, the firefight, all of it, to news outlets and trusted government officials across the country. And as the gunfire died and the smoke began to clear, Claire emerged from her hiding spot. The scene before her was one of controlled chaos. Reeves and her team were subdued, being cuffed by Brandon's loyal agents. George appeared at Claire's side, his hand finding hers and squeezing it tightly. "It's over," he said softly. "We did it." Even as relief washed over her, Claire knew this was just the beginning. They had exposed the corruption, but the fight to dismantle it entirely was far from over. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Claire looked at George and Brandon, at the unlikely family they had formed through this ordeal. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The truth had finally come to light, and nothing would ever be the same again. Now, the aftermath of that night unfolded like a whirlwind. News of the corruption scandal broke across the nation, sending shockwaves through every level of government. Claire, George and Brandon found themselves at the center of a media storm, hailed as heroes by some and vilified by others. In the weeks that followed, they worked tirelessly with federal prosecutors, providing testimony and evidence that would bring down dozens of high-ranking officials. It was exhausting, often disheartening work, but the thought of finally achieving justice kept them going. Emma and Samantha were brought out of hiding, reuniting with Claire and George in a tearful, joyous moment that none of them would ever forget. As they held each other tightly, Claire realized that through all the chaos and danger, they had become a family, unconventional perhaps, but bound by love and shared experience. As the dust began to settle, Claire found herself facing an uncertain future. Her old life as a graphic designer seemed like a distant memory, yet the thought of continuing in this world of intrigue and danger held little appeal. It was George who provided the answer. One evening, as they sat on the porch of a safe house, watching Samantha play in the yard, he turned to Claire with a tentative smile. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice soft, "about the future. About us." Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "What about us?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. George took her hand in his. "I know it's crazy with everything we've been through. But Claire, I can't imagine facing whatever comes next without you by my side. You, me, Samantha, we could be a family. If you want that." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she looked at George, at the love and hope shining in his face. She thought of Anna, of the guilt she had carried for so long. But she also thought of the connection she and George had forged, of the way Samantha had wormed her way into her heart. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Yes, I want that." As they sealed their promise with a kiss, Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still battles to be fought, wounds to be healed. But for the first time in years, she felt hope for the future, a future filled with love, family, and the promise of a new beginning. Brandon joined them later that evening, his face weary but satisfied. "It's really over," he said, sinking into a chair. "The last of the conspirators have been arrested. We did it." They raised a toast to justice, to truth, and to the family they had found in each other. As the sun set on this chapter of their lives, Claire looked at the faces of those she loved and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had faced the darkness together and emerged into the light. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The truth had set them free, and the future, at last, was theirs to shape. As we close this chapter of Claire's journey, we're reminded that even in our darkest moments, hope can flourish. This story speaks to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of connection. It shows us that family isn't always bound by blood, but by shared experiences and unwavering support. Claire's transformation from a lone whistleblower to the cornerstone of a loving, unconventional family reminds us that our past doesn't define us. It's our choices, our courage, and the love we share that shape our future. To those who feel alone in their fight for justice, remember Claire's story. One voice can spark a revolution. One act of bravery can topple corrupt empires. And in the process of fighting for what's right, you may find your true family, those who stand beside you when the world turns its back. Love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even amidst chaos and danger. George and Claire's journey from grief and suspicion to love and hope is a testament to the healing power of open heart. As you reflect on this tale, ask yourself, what truths are you willing to fight for? What family have you found in unexpected places? And most importantly, how can you be the light in someone else's darkness? Remember, like Claire, your story isn't over. Every day is a new chance to stand up for what's right, to love fiercely, and to build the family you choose. Your voice matters, your courage counts, and your capacity for love can change not just your world, but the world around you. Dear listeners, your support means the world to us. Your engagement fuels our passion to craft compelling stories that touch hearts and inspire minds. We're deeply grateful for every moment you've spent with Claire, George, and their unconventional family on this thrilling journey. If this tale of courage, justice, and unexpected love has resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Your feedback is the lifeblood of our creative process, helping us weave even more captivating narratives in the future. Did Claire's story stir your emotions? Did you find yourself rooting for justice alongside our unlikely heroes? If so, we invite you to leave a comment with the number 1. Your 1 tells us that these are the kinds of stories you want to hear more of. Hungry for more? Eager to discover what the future holds for Claire, George, and their newfound family? If you're craving a continuation of their journey, drop a 2 in the comments. Your 2 could be the key that unlocks the next chapter of their saga. Of course, if there were parts of the story you didn't quite agree with, or moments that didn't sit right with you, we're all ears. Your honest opinions help us grow and improve. Please share your thoughts. We value every perspective. Lastly, if you've enjoyed this rollercoaster ride of emotions and suspense, consider subscribing to our channel. Your subscription is more than just a click. It's a vote of confidence in Aesignum, and a signal that you want more stories that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. Together, let's continue to explore the depths of human resilience, the power of truth, and the unexpected places where love can bloom.